So, to begin with, we're going to take a few minutes to understand 3 points. Why it's essential today to consciously choose the cloud where you store your entire digital and professional life. The very first point is the legal aspect. And when you store files in an American or Chinese cloud, you need to be aware that these countries can access your data on request. And that's even if these companies almost all have data centers in Switzerland or Europe. In other words, as soon as you store data in an American or Chinese cloud, and this data is processed by software developed in the USA or in a state outside Europe, these states can easily access it thanks to extraterritorial laws such as the Cloud Act. And if this criterion should not be enough, we'll give his sign saved or shared to third parties outside Europe in countries that do not necessarily comply with the RGPD. And if you don't believe me, just yesterday, I went to Microsoft's website, not to mention them. There's the URL at the bottom. And this is an extract from their general terms and conditions. I'll let you read the parts in red. It just repeats what I've just told you in a simplified way. The second point is everything to do with privacy. Most clouds are managed by publicly traded companies. And when you have a listed company, you naturally have to answer to shareholders. And the problem is that today, all data is concentrated in a few clouds. What's more, these companies represent such a significant economic weight that they now carry strategic weight in terms of geopolitics. And then there's the fact that some of these companies' business models are directly linked to the analysis and exploitation of our data. So, as far as Infomaniak is concerned, the framework is extremely clear. The data is stored and processed by a single company that controls the entire value chain, including the software layer. What's more, Infomaniak is a Swiss company that designs and manages its own data centers and software solutions. So here, everything is simple, the framework is simple, and it's the same person who manages your data end-to-end with the same commitments. And when it comes to privacy, the company belongs exclusively to its employees. And the business model is simply to sell products to companies and people who use them. There's no advertising model. There's no development of AI based on your data. And if there is AI, it's clearly presented as such. And it's you who decides whether or not you want to share your data in a completely anonymized and containerized way. The third and final aspect I'd like to address concerns our social, economic, and ecological responsibility. And when we work with a local player, it's possible to talk to someone who understands their reality and who can also put us in touch with local experts. And then there's the whole ecological aspect. These days, marketing campaigns that promise to be climate neutral by the end of the year are a thing of the past. And that's why, for us, the aim is to be really concrete. We offset 200% of all the emissions generated by our activities, including the transport of servers from China to Europe. Everything is taken into account, including employee travel. We've been using only renewable energy for a long time. We're building our own solar power plants with an ambitious goal in mind. That's to produce as much energy as we consume. And all that, unfortunately, won't avoid the 1 ton, 8 to 2 tons, worse than 4 tons, of CO2 that are emitted to produce a single server. And that's why we're extending server lifetimes to 15 years. And that's the magic of the cloud. We can do this without compromising service reliability and performance, because today, a service is completely replicated in at least 2 data centers. With the cloud, you can accumulate the power of several servers without realizing it, but that's not enough for our taste. That's why we're building an innovative data center. As far as we know, it's the only project in our latitudes that will enable us to fully recover the energy consumed by the entire infrastructure for domestic or industrial use. It will heat up to 6,000 homes in winter and several tens of thousands in summer and provide hot water for people. So much for the introductory aspect. Why is it important to choose the cloud you're going to use? It's not trivial at all. And now that we've seen how kSuite differs from a legal point of view, in terms of private respect and the impact of CSR, the question we're all asking ourselves is, in the end, what is the tool itself worth? What is kSuite worth in practice? And for this part, I'm going to give the floor to Adrian, who's going to show us what a typical working day with kSuite looks like. Thank you very much, Adrian.
So first of all, a preface for this technical presentation. The slides you see, so the presentation you see, it's powered by Canary. So it's our tool that powers this presentation. So what you see in terms of fluidity and so on is what all our users are entitled to. Now, as for the kSuite, we at Infomaniak understand that today the most important thing for a company, no matter how big or small, is communication, whether internal or external. And today, whether you're working from home, face-to-face or not, it's important to have an instant messaging system that's easy to use. And we're going to start with kChat, our internal and external instant messaging solution, which we've created in response to today's modern issues. So here we see the kChat interface with a conversation channel called General. In terms of software presentation, on the left, we see that we have our channels, the various organizational channels created by these administrators. So we have a general channel, a service channel, and a sales channel. And here we also see the people I've interacted with recently send private messages. In terms of logic and confidentiality, there are two different ways of working. You can create two different types of channel. You can create a public channel. What we mean by a public channel is that everyone in your kSuite will have access to it. So it's a channel in which you're going to put general information for the company, for all the employees. Afterwards, if you need a private channel, typically with very important people, sales, very important human resources, there if you click on private channel, only the people you or the approved administrators, the people you've added, can see the messages in it. And even if you have a sharing link, because in kChat you can share messages with other people, messages, for example, if a colleague sends you a message on general, he'll send you a URL. Without access to a URL from a private channel, won't see anything. Even at the private level, you won't see anything. So there's no risk of data leakage. So there you have it, two ways of managing communication channels. Then, in terms of communication, as I was saying, there's personal messaging, where you can chat directly with a specific person. Or here again, you have a second option, which is groups. Typically, if you want to talk to two people at the same time, with three people in the conversation, you can add my colleague Adrian. I'll also add my colleague Leah. And then I'll create a conversation that will take all three people in it. I can also define a header. Let's say I'm going to put here, this conversation, I'm going to call it project.
I could also put a link to a Trello board or an Ocean here.
Okay, absolutely. There at the top you can hang, we call it hanging, but so URLs, tools that are useful to you on this conversation specifically. Then you can also pin messages. If there's an important message in the conversation, you can pin it. That way, from this button, without having to go back through the entire history of the conversation, you can see the important messages that were exchanged at the time.
And all the members of that channel will see those pinned messages. Absolutely. Very handy for key information or milestones. See.
Or let's say in case of absence, you can plan ahead for your colleague's return by pinning the messages. And as soon as he comes back, he can say to himself, well, I'm going to go and look at the pinned messages. He'll be able to see them so he can catch up without having to reread all the conversations, because there are often a lot of them on all sides. So that's for the communication part. Later, we made kChat to merge it and enhance our customer interaction.
It's a unified communications platform.
That's it. To unify our services. So making kChat more powerful by bringing every advantage of each of our products to it. In terms of integration, we've gone a long way with kMeet. Today, instant messaging also means video conferencing.
Perhaps just before moving on to this aspect, the power of a tool like this in business is that, used properly, it will enable you to eliminate almost all the emails that employees send to each other internally. Because channels are used to centralize information with the right people, either by project or by team. As a result, everyone has the same information in the same place at all times. And even if, as Adrian pointed out, some employees are on vacation. What's more, personal messages will make it possible to chat between frequent contacts. Chosen. And here, all the exchanges that take place internally will only concern these people, and not all the members of a team.
Then, in terms of communication, there's the video conferencing aspect, and our aim with the kSuite, but above all with kChat, is to simplify communication, the way information is relayed within the company. So typically, in many companies today, to start a video conference, you have to create a link. Then you have to share this link with all the employees with whom you want to have this video conference. With kChat, we've integrated kMeet directly into the product experience with this Start a Meeting button. The advantage of this Start a Meeting button is that it will send a notification to all the people on this channel, everyone, with a direct link. We're going to do a demo right now. It's opening. As the initiator of this video meeting, a link will open for me from, and people who are on kMeet will just have to click on the link on the open button, so you don't have to go back to 10, 15, 100 people sharing links for a video conference. And if, let's say, I now close this video conference, for example, on kMeet, in a few seconds, it'll echo and show the person that the meeting is over. So you avoid all those exchanges. Oh dear, I've missed the video. I'm 5-10 minutes late. Is it still on? The person can see it directly. So that's kMeet integration. And then with kMeet integration, it's also a great way of chatting one-to-one with your colleagues. Here, typically, I'm going to start a kMeet discussion with my colleague Adrian.
Good. While the video is playing, it would be possible to talk to an external provider where it's limited to his organization and the users of his suite. That's an excellent question.
You can add external partners to your chat. This means that if you suddenly need to chat with a provider, you can add them to the chat. They'll already have access to you, so they can chat with you. He'll only have access to the communication channel to which you've given him access.
So you keep your information secure.
And above all, you retain control from the moment the interaction, the exchange of information, is over.
Remove.
At that point, if you remove the chat, it has no interface at all. His rights, in fact, are instantly revoked. Let's take the meeting with my colleague Adrian. This is the kMeet interface. I can choose wallpapers. Here the webcam is used for the webinar, and we're off. My colleague Adrian has logged on. I can chat with him directly in the kMeet. If we're in a group, I can also launch polls. And in terms of the collaboration I can have with my colleagues, it goes much further. Here we have video and audio. Let's take an example. I'll take a right-hand shared link. You can see that my colleague Adrian has access to this document. I'm going to send it back to him and tell him, can you edit this document? Sure, I'll also open the package, so that's it. Word document, it's an official document to prove to you that on our solution, a migration from Microsoft to Infomaniak goes really smoothly. So there you have it, my colleague Adrian. I'd like to say hello, many thanks to him, and you can see that he's the one editing the message. So you can clearly see it's easy to see who's actually editing the message. For the record, Infomaniak has already tested one document with over 200 people. Then it becomes a bit of a cacophony because
yes, there are too many questions.
In terms of infrastructure, on the other hand, it's impeccable, it's fluid. After that, you need to know that when it comes to editing, you have two ways of presenting changes made by your colleagues. You can either edit directly, which you can see here with my colleague Adrian. So as soon as he makes a modification, it replicates the instant on my screen too. You have deferred editing, where we'll send you a notification saying that your colleague has made such and such a number of modifications. Would you like to see them now? This lets you keep control of the flow.
See,
you have, and perhaps over the information you have in front of you.
It's very useful when in a meeting you're working on a document and you're in the process of presenting it, and at the same time there are people working on it. This avoids the unpleasant surprise of constantly having the document being modified and moved around.
That's collaboration. I'll close the document. As you can see, everything remains within the Infomaniak ecosystem. So on the messaging side, it's kChat. I'm chatting with my colleague on kChat. I open a video conference with kMeet with a single click. Afterwards, I can share files with him, and we can already work together really easily.
In relation to kMeet, is there a user limit? How does that work? Is it related to the number of breakout users or the number of users?
Not at all. We don't have a limit on the number of users. Several times a year at Infomaniak, we hold Ask Me Anything sessions with our management team, in which over 200 people are connected. So there's no limit. If you want to give a webinar or something else, no problem. Let's go back to kChat and talk about the important messages category. This is an important message category. It ensures that important messages are relayed to your collaborators. With channels, you can tag specific people. Typically, I'll tag my colleague Leah. I'll be able to post information specifically for her, so it'll be on a public channel. But by putting the person directly on a message, it allows them to get a notification saying, attention, we're talking about you, we're probably asking you a question. Can you edit its importance? So we have the standard message, the everyday exchanges. Then there are the important messages. With an important message, it's a specific notification that will go out to your collaborators. And if it's an urgent message, in addition to having a specific notification, kChat will ask the person to confirm that they've seen the message. For example, I'll put the message urgent, I'll give test. The little number with the 0 is the number of people who have clicked on it and confirmed that they've read the message. You'll be able to tell who's seen the message and whether it's been passed on company-wide or channel-wide. This is very useful for keeping. Yes, it allows you to validate
by all employees. And who says even?
The message, exchanging information every day. Most of the day means searches that can be a bit of a headache on some instant messaging software. We've tried to make it as smart as possible. First of all, in the search bar, you can search for either messages or files. Nowadays, we do a lot of our work by sending and receiving documents. We wanted users to be able to define what they are specifically looking for simply by clicking on the search button. And if you're looking for, let's say, a message, there you have a customization list. You can enter your search field and say, I know I'm looking for a message from such and such a colleague, dated ta-ta-ta. And this will already sort you out and show you only the important information. The same goes for files. You can tell which file you need. So if you remember that it was colleague X or Y who shared it with you on such and such a date, and also the type of file. Because often you'll think, oh dear, someone gave me a PDF, but
this makes it really easy to get your hands on documents. And of course, you can search all of kChat. Absolutely.
All the channels you have access to and all the private conversations, everything is searchable with this tool here. Speaking of communication, we've also implemented an emoticon system. So you can, here I've put the desktop emoticon. It's very useful for saying I'm teleworking, I'm in the office. It avoids a quid pro quo. And also put your status. Typically, if you don't want to be disturbed, you don't want someone to start a meeting right away, you can set your status to not disturbed or absent.
As soon as I leave the laptop, I can take it with me in my pocket.
So absolutely, we have applications on iOS and Android. You can also access mobile devices from the web.
I'm only talking to the devices from their web browser.
Get a notification.
You get a notification as soon as someone mentions you in a conversation,
and so on. And it really lets you share
files too, or consult files on the move.
Absolutely. And importantly, there's activity detection on the software. What I mean by this is that if, let's say, my computer goes away, I leave it and it goes into standby mode. We'll stop sending notifications to the computer because we're assuming that the user is no longer on the computer. We'll switch to the mobile. So when you come back to the computer, you don't have to deal with 100 notifications. Double.
Absolutely.
Notification. That's
one
it.
notification.
In fact, you read
That's
back
it. So in fact,
the delay
you read back the delay you've got,
and
also an input notification that a software program has sent you. So that's what we've been thinking about, this little feature. And that's why, if you're no longer active, we're going to set you to absent status automatically on the software. Something that I think is just as important to mention in business, we're not necessarily going to do it because otherwise we'll switch over to our Infomaniak environment. But I see that on the left, you have the test environment we've created. That's right. And then you have the in for Infomaniak right there. And if you click on that, you'll actually switch over to the Infomaniak organization. So this is really powerful because it allows you to connect several organizations in the same software and switch from one to the other each other.
Absolutely.
And above all, for partners working with us, it's an extremely interesting diagnostic tool because they can communicate with all the organizations, associations that manage and switch from one to the other in a single click, completely. And with Camille's screen sharing, you can help people at a distance easily exchange ideas and work together. That's the whole point.
So much for the kChat part. So this is the internal messaging, direct messaging part. We'll now move on to the productivity part, i.e. email. Mails are less new compared to kChat. On the other hand, we have a number of new features that have come out recently. Typically, we have mini zaps. So here's my mail interface where I received my invitation mail to join the kSuite. And in the bottom right-hand corner, a menu where the user can display calendar, for example. This means that if you get an email saying, "Are you free tomorrow?" you can consult your calendar directly from this mini app. Here, typically on March 21, there was an event. That's on the test environment. Same thing with contacts. You can display your contacts and you can also display your tasks. In the old days, you had to switch between several different tabs. Now everything is right there on top. When it comes to kMail's email management, we'll already do a sort if it's enabled by the user. We've already sorted out everything related to promotions and social networks. This is to ensure that everything that arrives in the inbox is really legitimate email, because newsletters and the like are sorted automatically.
Yes. Today there's a question that interests me because there are still a lot of people who are very attached to their email software, whether it's Microsoft Outlook, Apple Mail, Thunderbird, or whatever. And today, what's the advantage? To stop using these programs and instead opt for webmail.
So advantage number one is the one we try to emphasize the most. And the one that resonates most with users is the fact that it's maintenance free. What Outlook, Thunderbird, or whatever says is a local installation, an installation that needs updating, settings that also need to be kept up to date. And in the specific case of Outlook, it also means a license. The advantage of Infomaniak webmail is that any device with a relatively recent web browser can access it. This
it's
means
an administrator's perimeter.
Partners, and
By
even
the way,
users who really don't want to deal with the hassle can access the essentials directly without having to install anything.
That's that. And then there's the whole security aspect, where as soon as you click on a link, it's going to be checked whether it's dangerous or not. Unless I'm mistaken, we've just implemented this. From now on, when there are emails coming from inside or outside the organization, we can see it. This allows us to know if we're dealing with an email that we're 100% sure is legitimate and not phishing, because it's from someone in our own organization. And then there's the whole collaboration aspect with calendar sharing. It might be interesting to show this aspect as well, because that's something you won't necessarily find in Thunderbird, or at least not so easily.
The advantages of the Infomaniak workspace also include the perfectly mail-based aspect of communication, is the little features we've been able to add, such as translation. On Infomaniak Mail, you can now translate an email before sending or on receipt in just a few clicks, and it's a translation that's done in-house, so it's 100% made. The text you translate is not sent to other servers, so it's all these little features and, as you say, collaboration that make this solution so powerful. Talking about the calendar, maybe we'll skip that. In terms of the calendar, you'll already have a calendar, which is created when your kSuite is initialized. So here we have the calendar called Swiss Architecture, our demo account, and here you can see past events. This is my week, and we're going to create one. We're going to create a new event directly here. It's an event we'll call reunification, for example. I'll give it the specific horror. I can also say it's the whole day. I can put
elements,
a location,
we can put a place.
so that when people receive the invitation, there's already a place in-house. Let's say, I don't know, room number 62 or a hotel or something else if it's a conference, then you can add your colleagues. And one of the advantages of this world of using the IT solution directly on the web is that we've been able to integrate our products. So if you want to create a kMeet conference room for your event, we'll create a link that will only be active when the event begins. And this is the link that will be sent to all the people you invite. So let's say my reunion is today at 3 p.m. after the webinar. I'll have it recorded. It'll appear on all the calendars of all the users' calendars.
I have a question. Since you didn't add any participants, we couldn't see that you were offering to send an invitation notification to your users. That's it. I think it's interesting. It's interesting to show this because it's really something that changes the game completely. The people you add as guests will receive an email with not only the link to the video conference, but they can directly choose to accept, decline, or say they may attend, and the event will automatically be added to their calendar with the status corresponding to their choice. Thank you. The worry is adult hazards.
But then as guest management is also very robust, allowing you to keep track of who's coming and who's not, and to have a direct dispatch of what's being done. Guests can also reply with the status, I don't know, if I'll be there. If it's a face-to-face meeting, you can prepare a room. You say, okay, I've got 10 people coming, so I'm going to prepare 10 seats. Prepare 10 seats. In terms of advanced functionalities, for event creation, you can add reminders. These are reminders that will be sent by email or pop-up. By pop-up, I mean if they're working on the Infomaniak workspace, whatever the interface, an email, a calendar.
And not only when you check by pop-up, if you synchronize the calendar with your phone, this will also trigger a reminder notification.
You can then define how long before you want this notification, and if afterwards you want maybe one last one for really, really important events. You can also set a private moment so that it's only on your calendar and not on the calendar of the rest of your colleagues. Once the event has been created and is accessible on the calendar, people who have access to it or who have been invited to it can simply click on the link provided by the person in question to access the meeting. This saves you having to send a notification to your guests for the event, plus a second notification for the more decentralized meeting.
For example, can you find your phone contacts in kSuite? Where can I find kSuite contacts on my phone? How does it work?
So, for contacts, specifically for contacts, we have synchronization software to either replicate what's locally on the device and send it to the server, or vice versa. Take what's on the server and replicate it on the device. On Android, this is an application called kSync. It's an application that will mirror both sides. And on iOS lets us go a step further. On this side, we have profile management. We'll send a profile to the user. You'll be able to send a profile to the user in question. And it's a little file that the iPhone or iPad or Mac recognizes, and that will already create a synchronization without having to enter any parameters, without having to install anything. And it will synchronize native Apple applications with our servers. At any given moment, there's a synchronization.
So kSuite really makes it possible to centralize all those appointments, all those contacts in one place. And then maybe just show the wizard where you access all that, because it may look complicated, but it's not. Because there's a wizard that allows you to follow everything step by step.
So this is the Infomaniak assistant we call Sync, simply put. First, it detects which device you're using, device you're on. Here, the demo device is a PC. And if, let's say, you're accessing it with your Android phone, it'll suggest the kSync application. If you're accessing it with an iPad, then you'll be offered the profile. And if, let's say, you're accessing it on this device, my calendars. Let's say I select my emails.
It's time to learn.
It'll give me a configuration procedure on heavy software, like Outlook 365. And if it's my contacts and calendar, the same thing. I'll be given a procedure on how to do it. And by simply accessing configinfomaniak.com on the device of your choice, We actually make it easy for you. All you have to do is press generate or install, and off you go.
Okay, and on a macOS environment, this is what's going to allow you to send the profile to yourself by email? Yes, this is it.
Right. Absolutely, yes. So much for the calendar part. Speaking of phone or mobile support, you should know that we're currently developing our application, Mail. And when I developed it, it was being tested internally, but it's going to be in beta very soon. I'd even say it's a matter of days. It's a matter, yes, of days, not to say hours. But in concrete terms, the mobile user will find an interface similar to Infomaniak WorkSpace, with the same color codes, the same logic, the same sorting of mailboxes, with promotion in social networks. It's also worth noting that this application is push-enabled. So, with a standard EMAP client, it will depend on how often the place is updated.
The frequency of place
which
updates.
Could be 1 minute, 15 minutes, or whatever.
1 minute, 15 minutes, or whatever. With the Infomaniak mail app, it's available directly with notifications the instant you receive the mail in question. There's also a huge advantage that the mobile app will bring you on both iOS and Android, which is that in countries where internet access providers block the EMAP protocol, well, with the mobile app, it'll go straight through because it doesn't use the EMAP protocol, but connects directly to the API of our solutions and servers.
Absolutely. So much for the mail and calendar part. Let's get on with the drive. Okay, here we go. On the drive level, first of all, we're on calendar. So here's the kDrive interface. kDrive's interface is really a solution that will enable you to share and work together within your company. We saw it before during the live document editing demo. Then, in terms of presentation, WebView is presented as follows, with common folders. Common folders are those you share with one or more people in your company. And this will enable you to have, let's say, a centralized hub for document editing. That, I think
it's worth taking a little more time on those famous common files, whose comprehension will be considerably improved with a future update due in the next few months. But really, these common files are team or project files. And it's a bit like kChat. In fact, you choose which members of your organization will be able to access them. And the great strength of shared folders is that all the documents you place in them will automatically be available to the members you've authorized to access them. And then, on the other hand, documents outside these shared folders are your private folders, which only you can see, or else except for those, because of course you can share private folders with other users of your choice. But in the corporate world, these shared folders are extremely powerful. Common, because it allows you to have a common file for finance, for human resources, for after-sales service, for support, for a development center. As a result, each department or project has its own ecosystem of resources. And you also have the guarantee that everyone has access to the right information. And then the idea with kChat, which came out very recently, is really to create a synergy between everyone.
With common documents, it was shared. And as you said, it's going to be redesigned soon. It's one of the projects for the year off, as well as redesigning the way it works so that it's much clearer for the user. We're also going to rename it. Because today, common documents perhaps swears a little on a French tree structure. So you need to know that it's planned, it's being worked on, it's going to be modified, it's going to be much clearer, centralized, and, above all, in French. The same goes for the desktop application. But I thought I'd finish with the desktop application in terms of presentation. So already, in terms of tree presentation, you can color the folders. This makes it a little easier. They're easier to locate. And if I display this as a list, we can also add categories. Here I'm going to take a typical category and call it of life. So you can add or remove categories, which also allows you to search for specific documents. And it's important to know that you can also create categories within your own organization. So if I create a category and name it project, I'm going to add a category after it, which can be used by all other collaborators. Then in terms of the interactivity of the files, the way you can work with them, the strength of kDrive and kSuite, it really is an all-in-one solution. So here I'm going to take a document, an XLSX imported directly from Microsoft XLSX. I open it and our Grids Office suite takes over, allowing me to work on the document. The integration of Office tools means that a customer, a user with a kSuite, has access to all the tools they need to work in a single interface.
And here too, I can have a colleague open the same document. And we can collaborate together too.
Absolutely. As we saw earlier in the text demo, the same applies to XLSX and PPTX documents.
And it's also possible to share a Microsoft Office document outside your organization.
So yes, so already kSuite, Drive and the Office suite integrate perfectly with existing workflows. In other words, if you need to send your document to someone who isn't a kDrive user, because maybe it's an external communications person, they'll be able to open the document, they'll be able to choose whether to edit it directly in the Drive via the web view or edit it on their Excel. Excel, in fact, doesn't see the difference when the file has been processed on the kDrive. As far as he's concerned, he opens it as a perfectly conventional XLSX file, and when he sends the document back to you, you'll be able to reopen it on the interface and continue working afterwards.
And here, for example, if I wanted to share this document, what would happen?
So, for document sharing, we come here. There are two types of sharing. We have email sharing, where the person will receive a nice email saying, "Here, you've been invited to access this document." Or alternatively, here we have the full view sharing mode, where you can choose who has access to your kSuite and your organization. I'm going to put my colleague Adrian back in. I'll also put my colleague Bertrand on it. I can send them a message saying, "Here's what we've notified."
It will be modified by email, I imagine. Absolutely.
And then I can give a clearance level on the document. So if I put little consulted, they can only consult it, download it, or add comments. Because it's important to know that in terms of the interface here, you're able to converse with your collaborators. There's a built-in chat. You can chat and say, "Here, I think this modification is relevant." And you can also put comments on specific points in the document. And here I'm going to do add. They'll get a notification. And then on this menu, I can consult and see who has access and who doesn't to the document in question. And at any moment, with a few clicks, for example, my colleague Bertrand, I'm going to set him to little consult only. And my colleague Adrian, I'm going to remove him from the share. And it's done on the fly, and that's it.
And now, if it were an external service provider who wasn't in my organization, what would he do next?
So, at this level, we're going to switch to sharing links. Instead of using the internal drive level with people who have drives, we'll use invitation links. And here you can choose between two sharing policies. You have restricted. This means users you've added as external users on your drive. Otherwise, public sharing. If you need to share, say, a press release to hundreds of people, but you don't want to add them by hand, you do that as a public share. Note that public shares offer advanced settings that are quite interesting. Let's talk about them now. You can password protect a public share. So if you really want to make sure that it's people who know about it, who gave you the information, you can. You can also add an expiration date. That's feedback we've had a lot. About a year ago, typically from teachers or others, from people who thought, "I'm sharing my files." But in the end, I forget them. And that means that in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or even more, these links still exist on the internet. They're still out there. By adding an expiration date, you ensure that, for example, tomorrow at noon, the sharing link has stopped.
A final interesting option is download from share. By unchecking this option, you'll be able to download from the share.
You'll send a request to the viewer's internet browser, asking it not to allow downloading. Very useful for photographers or in the press or whatever. So that's all the extra options with the share links. And here, when I copy the link to my clipboard, it will store a sharing link for me. Here, I'm going to be able to give all the people who need access to the document.
Come back. And here, for example, my electricity supplier could click on this link and, without creating an Infomaniak account, access the resource. If he has modification rights, he can contribute to it. If he has reading rights, he can just read it.
There won't even be an invitation to log in. If it's, say, a doc or Excel or PowerPoint, directly on the editor, i.e. in the editor, you can choose what you do with the file. You can download it, i.e. we propose conversion on the fly. If you suddenly want to convert, which is very useful for PowerPoint presentations, if you want to convert it to PDF, you can do that on the fly. If you have computers that use LibreOffice exclusively, you can also convert them. I can also print it out or save it locally afterwards. So much for the Office productivity part of the drive.
Thanks for this great live demonstration. Thank you very much. I'm always impressed because I use these applications on a daily basis. But the cost, for example, of the urgent message on kChat, I've never seen, and it's super useful to validate a project or that someone has taken note of the information. In the previous section, you showed us how this whole ecosystem works. And now, what I find interesting is to see what it's like for IT or human resources managers who have to manage the flow of staff when someone joins the company or when someone leaves at the end of a fixed-term contract, for example. What happens?
As far as the kSuite is concerned, if you are an administrator or authorized by the administrator, you'll have this interface. This is the interface we call kSuite Management, which will contain all the important information. First, you'll see the number of users. Here, there are 7 users out of 10. It's the package that allows 10, but we can go up to 100, 200, 500 without any problem. The number of share links is shown next. If all of a sudden you see that there are too many sharing links, you can ask for them to be reduced. This allows the administrator to have all the important information on the kSuite at a glance.
I'm thinking of a situation where the internal security policy would be to not to allow public sharing links for security reasons, because we don't want documents to be leaked externally. It's a way of controlling it, of keeping an eye on it.
After that, as far as managing people and users is concerned, we'll come here to user management. Here you'll find a list of all users who have access to the kSuite. You can see the number and the team. They are what you, when you add a user, can define in one or more teams.
And what do these teams actually do?
Teams, it's already going to be useful for catch-up. If you want to speak exclusively to the sales or accounting department, instead of having to systematically type in all the people who are in that department, you type in accounting, and it'll take my colleague Bertrand and Adrian directly.
And so, in Drive, it can also automatically give him access to a common accounting folder.
When you create the accounting folder, you're going to be asked whether it's a folder just for you or a folder for sharing. And then, if you say, yes, I want to share it, it will ask you which team you want to share it with. And that's when you can put accounting directly.
What I really wanted to emphasize is that team management saves you an incredible amount of time. Because when you add a user to a team, this user will automatically benefit from the rights specific to this team, whether it's access to calendars, address books, or shared folders in kDrive.
In terms of user management, you can see the user's last connection, which is often useful for human resources or other purposes, and the role he or she has in the kSuite. There are several roles. There's the person legally responsible, who either created the product or was authorized to do so by the person who created it. This person will really have access to all the options needed to manage his or her user base. After that comes the collaborator role. The collaborator role has a right of use. They will be able to use the Drive and kChat within the limits you've set for them. However, he won't be able to modify important information, and above all, he'll have absolutely no impact on other users. This is where the person legally responsible or the administrator can manage security.
In concrete terms, if you click on a user, how does it work to modify rights or access?
If you click on a user, you'll see that he or she is part of the kSuite with the little banner and icon. We'll see their clearance level. We'll see their last connection. On which device it is possible to detect whether it is Windows, Mac, or other. Security level. Let's go back to the previous screen. Here, at the security level, the administrator can see at a glance where the user is. Today, it's still very important for IT departments, especially their management, to make sure that everyone is up to date with passwords, double authentication, telephone numbers. And now at a glance, I can see that unfortunately my colleagues don't play the game in terms of security. But it's possible to manage this and see at a glance where we are in terms of the user's overall security. And if we take, for example, here on the page presenting the person, we also see the telephone number, which can be useful for communication directly within the company. We can also see what he has access to in the kSuite. So he has access to the email address automatically created for him. Specific rights to this email address can also be defined from this page. This means that the administrator can say, you have access to your mailbox, you can reply to messages. On the other hand, you don't have access to responder management, forwarding management, or spam filter management. This is that will him. That's why when a user is added, you're asked for their first and last name. This is to make things easier for you later, because you'll be able to create signature templates by setting two variables: name, phone number, and when the user fills in these parameters, it will automatically generate the signature with this information.
So everyone in the company has a corporate signature. And another advantage of this user listing, and this is something brand new, which has just been released or will be released in the next few days, is that it will generate a list of all the users in the company, is that it will generate a dynamically updated address book with all the users in your organization. And that's great because internally, when you send out general information emails, you'll have an address book that's always up to date with all the members of your organization.
As the administrator of the suite, you really have all the tools you need to manage your users and keep them safe. Afterwards, if, let's say, you need to make changes at team level, with a few clicks you can remove access to specific email addresses. When it comes to kSuite, there are two types of email address. There are nominative email addresses. So there's my colleague's email address. You can also have shared addresses. What's a shared address?
Technically called InfoHat, support hat. This is an address to which several people need access. But in the old days, you had to share IMAP passwords so that these people could consult them on the same software. Today, I can say my support hat address, sitearchitecture.com. I can add 3 of my colleagues, and the country can carry out day-to-day modifications to the team in public order. In other words, there are more than 10 billion euros in the company. There's no longer any security risk, especially when you're really adept at exchanging data at range. What happens when an employee has to leave the company? What about data management? Do you lose all your chat conversations? Do we lose all Drive files? When you delete a user...
So, when you delete a user, we're going to ask you a number of questions. First of all, we're going to ask you what you want to do with your Drive documents. We'll give you 2 options: delete the documents or recover them. And by retrieve, you can choose to retrieve them yourself as an admin or give them to a new person. This is the case with training courses. When a course ends, you have to delete the account and give it to someone else. And it's possible, in fact, to have a tunnel for passing these files from one person to another at the time of deletion. The same goes for emails and chat. You can choose to keep this information. And then, if the person had an Infomaniak account with products or whatever, it's simply going to change their email address to a generic recovery address. It's going to remove him entirely from the organization he was in. And the account, in effect, will become a ghost account with no connection to the old Breaker suite.
So a data management policy is complete. Or it's a guarantee that you'll really have a handle on your company's data and that you won't have any data leaks, any rather undesirable data losses. Okay, and then I see on the left that it's also from here that we manage work teams and activity reports. This is what we used to see before, with product management by team and rights management by team. So we save an enormous amount of time, and the activity reports, what are they really for?
So the activity report is useful, often for human resources or other purposes. You can really see who did what, when.
On which product. So in the event of a safety problem, it's invaluable for understanding what happened, by whom and how. And by whom and how.
Absolutely. And it's just as important for the drive if all of a sudden a file has been moved. Often, it's a handling error. That's it, you can't find it. Here too, you can simply enter the name of the file in question. It will find in the history what has been done with this document. And you should know that Infomaniak doesn't clean up the activity history. What we're hearing is that we're actually storing all this data from creation right through to the termination of the kSuite.
Something I think is also worth mentioning is that everything you see here in the manager can be driven by API. We're in the process of APIing all our products. So everything you see in this dashboard, in this manager, is already controllable for developers via API. Or if this isn't already the case, typically for kSuite, unless I'm mistaken, we don't yet have an API that covers kSuite. It's only kDrive at the moment, but it's something that's coming. This morning I had a taste of the administration interface of a web-based suite that has become a competitor, and I was shocked to see how complex it was with other solutions. I'm not used to using this administration interface on a daily basis because I'm more of an end user. And I really realized that it's very, very intuitive and easy to understand. And that support, here you didn't show it, but when you add a user, maybe that you can just show the detail. There's an assistant, which means that someone who works in human resources and has no IT skills will be able to follow the assistants and add a user and give them rights. It's just step by step. And at the end, the person will receive an email on their mailbox. You can do a demo. I think it's interesting to see how it works to add a new user.
Of this person. Will he be responsible for the box suite? Will he be an administrator or a collaborator? Let's take the most classic case, collaborator. And here we're already going to present you with options to refine these rights a little. Do you authorize the user to manage the accounts to track his architecture? No, but it can be useful if you have an accounting department that needs to make sure this sort of thing gets done. Allow the user to receive emails, event notifications, or billing notifications. Here, we'll put no. And then we can integrate it into a work team at that point. Let's take the example of management. You can add people to several teams at the same time. Let's say we take the management code, and that'll add it to this direction bubble. When you're communicating in kChat or sharing documents, when you quote at direction, it's going to go straight into it. So it's going to be in this user bubble. Then you'll have to decide what access rights this user will have on kDrive and kChat. Full access, limited access, both.
And limited access means that by default, the user will only have access to the folders or channels that have been authorized in the user bubble.
Exactly. He or she won't be able to make any changes, whether to the title, channels, etc.
Team. For example, he won't be able to access common documents support, but only his poor test webinar document.
And then when you'll be asked to create an email address with the domain name linked to the kSuite. This information field is automatically populated with the first and last names you've entered. This is the address available. Then you can choose the rights this person will have over the address. So since it's an address test, we're going to remove all rights. So the person won't have the right to change their password. They won't have the right to manage automatic responses, signatures, redirections, aliases, and all those options that the administrator keeps for himself, reserved for him. Then we can apply a signature template. And here, let's say we had a nice template with a website, a logo, lots of things. We'll apply it and take the first and last name variables to populate these signature information fields. And now we're going to ask you a very important question. How is the user going to connect to his account? Do you want them to log in using test.webinar, or do you require them to do so in some other way? You have access to this address. You can register for access with any address you like, an Infomaniak address or whatever. This is really to leave possible for the administrator. But here we'll go with what we recommend, which is that
Request.
He logs in with his address, clicks on Continue, you'll then be presented with several options for granting rights to this person. You'll be able to send an invitation. We've already prepared a table for you. And you'll be able to select the language. Very importantly, if you work with staff who don't necessarily speak the same language as you, you can edit the invitation link. Note that this invitation link will also determine the language of its manager. So he'll be able to register in his language or the one he's most comfortable with. Then, in terms of options, you can also send this by SMS, which is very useful. It means that your whole organization can send them SMS. They click on the link in the SMS, they log in, and the account is created.
What's magical is that the person is completely autonomous in creating their email address and immediately start communicating via kChat, via her email, and immediately start working since she has access to all her team's documents and all resources via kDrive. That's it.
Once you've completed the registration process, we'll go back to users. It will appear in the invitation. You can see the status of the invitation, whether the person accepted, declined, or simply did nothing. Please note that invitation codes are valid for 1 month to ensure that they don't remain free for years on the site.
At this stage, if you want to migrate to kSuite and already have everything in an alternative cloud,
Web,
be it Google WorkSpace or Microsoft 365, is it complicated? How does it work in practice? How do you retrieve these files, these contacts, these appointments?
So we wanted to make migration as simple as possible. And to make it as easy as possible, we've created some migration tools that I'm going to show you right now. First, let's go to the Microsoft Office Administration interface, which has its own visual style. And for an IT administrator, it's very simple. This is the user list, which is the same as on the kSuite. Here we're going to export users, creating a CSV file, which you can then upload to the Infomaniak wizard here. We'll take the list of your users, as well as any information you may have entered for telephone number, address, or other, and you'll pre-create this user base on kSuite using this information.
If I understand correctly, I can recreate in one go my entire list of users.
In 2 clicks.
And that's it. And all these people
Access
will have...
to my kSuite, absolutely. It'll generate a CSV file, which you'll then drag into the migration tool, where we'll pre-create these users for you. And what I mean by pre-create is that given that the kSuite has many levels of personalization in terms of user authorizations, rights, products, and so on, we'll actually create these addresses for you. And then it'll be up to you to define whether I want this group of people to have such and such rights, and so on. But in concrete terms, in terms of migration, for the 365 Parker kSuite, that's how it works. It's very simple. It's 2 clicks. Sorry. If you want to retrieve data from Microsoft 365, Dropbox, or other, we've also planned for this. We have a tool called Import External Data onto the Drive, where we'll ask you what your current provider is, we'll ask you to connect to it, and authorize Infomaniak to retrieve the content. You'll be asked to log in and authorize Infomaniak to retrieve the contents. We'll retrieve the tree structure and all the files, but what won't be retrieved are the shares, because in the communication APIs provided by third-party companies, we're not given the information. This file has been shared with X or Y people. You will, however, be able to find your file organization. So for an IT administrator, he'll import emails and addresses from the file, put them into the wizard will do the work on its side, then at drive level it'll be on the drive interface directly, where he'll have to take the files here. But in concrete terms, it takes just a few minutes or even a few hours for very, very, very large organizations. We've really tried to simplify all this as much as possible with a clear solution.
And what happens afterwards in terms of contacts, appointments, and email?
When you create the CSV file, you can also set the IMAP password for the addresses on the Microsoft side. If you set the IMAP password for the addresses on the Microsoft side, this will enable us to take the contents of these email addresses and then take them from our server and replicate them, i.e. old email address to the new Infomaniak provider, including folders. The folders are taken over, So your organization's tree structure is taken over. The date and time of the mails are also taken over. The original mails are taken over. And the status, read, unread, is taken over. Is it a copy? It's a copy. It's a carbon copy at time t, at the time of the party, of what was happening with the old provider to the new one. As for calendars and contacts, you can import these calendars or contacts in ICS format.
Then directly in the interface, you can drop them directly onto it,
you can drop them
or from a
onto
URL.
It, or from a
you
URL.
can also export your Google Calendar in Microsoft between QRM and copy them here.
And copy them here.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, we start by bringing in the users. If you fill in the EMAP parameters, it'll also fetch all the emails. Then we go into kDrive, into the import tool, to retrieve all the files. And then all each user has to do is import their calendar in ICS and their contacts in CSV. And this is where we can perhaps draw a parallel with the mobile devices we were talking about before. If the mobile device, the contacts have been synchronized locally, when you go to synchronize them, it will make a copy without you having to. That's it. So
for appointments, exactly.
Let's face it, it's not always fun to do. On the other hand, everything is done to simplify the process as much as possible. I suggest we move on to the questions. I've seen quite a few. The first question I saw was, is it possible to have several kSuites per organization?
So it's a kSuite by organization at the moment because we assume that you're going to have your main domain name and that's the one that's going to be used for the kSuite. So for the moment it's not possible. However, a user can have several kSuites on several organizations. Typically a partner.
While I'm looking for other questions, can you tell us what we're actually working on in relation to this kSuite, whether it's kDrive, kChat, etc., or the other applications in the ecosystem?
First of all, kDrive is undergoing a complete overhaul of its desktop application. It's currently being tested. In fact, it's the version currently installed on my machine, which is the version. Where before the old application communicated with our servers using a mixture of HTTPs and WebDAV, now it's switched to the API. It's a similar change to the one we made to the mobile application in the summer of May, and API communication means much more reliable and lighter communication in terms of the number of processes required to perform a file action. We hope to release it soon. It's currently undergoing intensive testing on both macOS and Windows, and the aim is to make synchronization much more reliable.
I'm seeing a lot of comments about synchronization too, about synchronization performance. So that's something that will be contested.
Here we go with what we've got for you.
Some people found the white theme a bit aggressive at night. Do we have something more relaxing for them?
One question. Here we are already in dark theme. We too click.
People,
in other words,
it's important to know that we're tuned to your web browser too. But of course, dark theme is available on all Infomaniak tools. On the subject of meeting rooms, is there anything we're working on to manage rooms or reservations?
Infos. Yes, it's on the list of things to do as a priority for Suite V. It's room management. You'll be able to reserve a room, and if someone tries to put on an event in the room at the same time, we'll tell them to watch out. They'll be told to be careful. It seems to be occupied.
There are a lot of questions about synchronization, so I'm going to answer them. Basically, it's as Adrian explained. If you have data on your phone, assume that you can synchronize everything on your phone in kSuite and vice versa. kSuite really lets you centralize all this information in one place in kSuite. The advantage is that everything is automatically backed up every day. There's a very powerful tool for restoring emails, contacts, and calendars, which allows you to do this on your own. So it's really a huge advantage to have everything centralized in one place. There are also users who point out that there are things in the feedback list, because you need to know that on all our kSuite tools, there's a feedback button at the top that you can click on. And this allows you to tell us what you need. What would you like to see? To vote for ideas that contribute to other users. Our aim is that when we plan the development of the product, we will prioritize our developments in relation to your needs. So that's really important, and we do things in the right order. The interface difference between kMeet app and kMeet web, or kChat or kDrive, is there a difference in interface?
There are differences in functionality, but not in interface. The interface is the same, and we want it to be as uniform as possible across all experiments. On the other hand, kMeet on desktop, with its dedicated application, lets you access or request access to the machine remotely. It also lets you draw. Typically, if you want to show something on a presentation, you're able to draw on the presentation and the person will see it on their screen too. The same goes for kChat. The desktop application and the web application are ultimately the same in terms of presentation. However, when it comes to advanced notifications, it's the desktop application that's best because it's really integrated with the OS, whether Windows or Mac OS. There's an interesting question.
An interesting question is kDrive.
pCloud into kDrive?
Already
Yes.
one is kDrive. It's possible to import from pCloud into kDrive.
Because pCloud supports WebDAV, and you can set up a WebDAV target, so to speak, from the external data import menu. So there's no dedicated icon for the moment. We're working on it. However, you can simply the WebDAV URL.
So you can simply contact pCloud.
pCloud provides this information anyway. After that, you enter the user in question, the password, the entry point, and off you go. We do the...
And still in relation to kDrive, can we have a drop-off zone? We've been asked.
Import. That's a good question. That's a good question. It's one of the features we like to highlight in our demos. You can create a Dropbox with just a few clicks. So here I am for Apple on the kDrive interface. On the left, in my tools, I have the Dropbox. Let's say I create a new Dropbox. I'll be able to give it a name. I'll call it test. I'll be able to choose where this Dropbox will go in the drive. By default, it's the root. And we'll also be able to add options because basically when someone drops files in the Dropbox, it'll send you a notification. You can remove this depending on the number of people dropping in. You can protect the Dropbox with a password. You can also add an expiry date and limit storage space. In other words, if some smart guy wants to put in a file of, I don't know, you can say, no, I expect PDFs from, so there's no need to accept that style of file. And the strength of the Dropbox is that it will really allow the person to upload the required files. When he enters his first and last name, it will already order you the deposit. So we know who's sharing what with us, exactly who's sharing what with you. And above all, when he's finished sharing, it removes him from this connection interface and he no longer has access to anything in the drive. And above all, he can't see the contents of the drive, nor the tree structure, nor the folder in question.
Also has a very important question for people who don't currently have kSuite, but who already have kDrive. It's now possible to migrate to kSuite and automatically recover the entire contents of your kDrive. The question we're being asked is what happens to the users in your organization? Will they all automatically go to kSuite? How does it work?
In terms of flow, the transition from kDrive to kSuite is as follows. We're already going to list the offers available with kSuite because there are several third parties to choose from. kSuite. Next, we're going to ask you, here in your organization, you seem to have maybe 10 users. Which of these users should make the journey to the kSuite? And then, when you tick this person, this person, this person, only these people will be added to the kSuite. For other people, however, it won't change a thing.
Goes way up.
They remain in your organization, but that's why in user management, kSuite users, a little logo next to it to symbolize the fact that they are in the kSuite. On the other hand, you may have organizations or cases where you have a classic user base, legacy, and a kSuite user base.
I'd also like to point out that we're currently working on the possibility of enabling to switch from a classic mail service to a kSuite with its own mail service. Eventually, therefore, all users who already have a kDrive or mail service with Infomaniak will be able to migrate to kSuite, retaining and choosing the mail service and kDrive they wish to use in their kSuite. We've also been asked if there's a WordPress plugin to save your site in kDrive.
So, no, not yet. The trick for now is that some WordPress plugins let you set a WebDAV disk as the backup destination. And there you can put your frame.
After that, I tend to advise people to use Swiss Backup for that. And then, from memory, there's a WordPress plugin, whose name escapes me, is Updraft Plus, which lets you configure a cloud backup space in Swift. And here, you'll be able to configure Swiss Backup with it. But I wouldn't necessarily use kDrive.
But it's more of
an enterprise collaboration tool that I'd rather not use. It's a backup tool, even if all your data is permanently triple replicated and you have a versioning system. But it's not a backup in the strict sense of the term, where you can restore your entire drive to 9 months earlier with an incremental retention policy, etc. Custom brand. I see it appearing in the chat. It's true that we haven't talked about it at all. Maybe I'll let you explain what it is, what it's for, what it can do.
Custom branding is an option in the kSuite. It all depends on the third-party activation of the kSuite and the offer you've chosen. But custom branding allows you to remove the Infomaniak.com from the URLs of the products you've chosen. Use. In other words, if we take swissarchitecture.ch as an example, it will become mail.swissarchitecture.ch. This really allows you to have a strong identity within your company, to really have your own platform, where kMeet links will no longer be named kamet.infomaniak.com, but will be named kMeet.your domain name. If you share links or files with business partners or others, it will be your domain name that will be used. And it also allows you, in the login interface, to remove the branding Infomaniak.com branding and analysis of the connection. So you really do have a clean interface for your tools.
We've also been asked if we plan to implement an SSO or OAuth solution for logging into other services via the Infomaniak account. We're working on it at the moment, so it's something we're working on. Obviously, some people are wondering what type of license to choose. What type of license to choose? Is it possible to have different license types for different users?
When you select a breakout suite, it's when you select the case that you'll have to select an offer. This offer will then govern all users in the case.
All right, there's no chance of my data ever being sold in China, so absolutely not. That's really not Infomaniak's policy. Infomaniak is an independent company owned by its employees. The legal forge is in Switzerland. The data centers are in Switzerland. Infomaniak's aim is to be an independent alternative to the web giants and to develop technological expertise at European level. So that's not on the agenda at all. In fact, we've written a blog article about it on news.infomaniak.com. It's called Cloud Ethic, where we explain our vision of cloud ethic. And for us, what the web is all about. And if you read the article, it'll put your mind at rest. We have some questions about kDrive. Is there any special support? It might also be interesting to talk about the recent evolution of the medium, I think. That might be interesting.
Sweet. Already, to help users who are new to kDrive, there's an introduction, a tutorial that's offered on the Drive interface. No new user will be able to learn a little about how the tool works. After that, with support, we try to make access as easy as possible. So in the bottom right-hand corner of the interface, you'll find a support button. We're already going to detect which product you're on. We're already going to suggest some subject-based courses. So here, I've opened the chatbot and it's offering me FrameAV synchronization in various devices, restoring a file to its previous version. What's digitized? These are the faculties that our users consult the most. On the other hand, it's very easy to contact support. You have a button here, and we ask you which ticket you'd like to use to contact support. We have a French number and a Swiss number. These numbers are not surcharged. So if you call, don't worry about this specific point. And then, in terms of support evolution, today we have dedicated teams of agents on specific subjects, including kDrive. So let's say you pick up the phone, give us a call, and we'll ask you. There will be pre-selection. You'll have to put 1, 2, 3 in relation to the product. And if you select kSuite, you'll be put directly in touch with an agent who has mastered these tools perfectly.
I'm sorry if you brought it up, but I was just reading the comments. We've come out with a premium support that's aimed at businesses, so B2B, that allows you to have unique contact people. That might be useful for some of you. Is there...
In addition to the one-person answers, you also have a priority phone number that lets you bypass the queues if you have an urgent request.
There are also some very interesting questions, which is a pleasure. Can we create a breakout suite with more than 300 users? Then yes.
Technically, there's no problem. You just need to contact us because we have specific pricing.
It's all tailor-made. Another question that's a bit like that is, are there any specific offers for organizations, associations, NGOs?
Well, not yet, but that'll happen eventually. We'll have a range of specific offers. However, in the meantime, for any association or other, if you need to be put in touch and have specific pricing, contact our support and we'll do what's necessary.
And one more question. How do you know what storage space you have with kDrive or kSuite? How does it work?
People seem to point out that we know per user, but we don't know the overall size.
On the level, to see the storage used.
That's it.
So to see the storage used, it's directly in the kSuite management. You'll see the storage you've subscribed to in relation to the third of kSuite offers, and also in relation to the number of users. Because kSuite means that each number of users or each additional user will also add storage to this pool. And then, at a glance, the administrator can see what's taking up storage. Because you need to know that kChat also has storage requirements, which are then stored on the Breaker Suite. And here we can clearly see that in our case, it's kDrive that takes up all the 120 megabytes to be used.
Can we test it? Are there people who say, I need to be able to test the kSuite solution to convince my management? How can they do that?
At present, you need a domain name to use kSuite. Afterwards, if you have a domain name or if you order a specific domain name for testing purposes, you can use the kSuite free of charge in its free third, so there's nothing to worry about. Then, if you can't or don't want to, kMeet, kMail or Ethic, which give you access to the Drive, Mail and Calendar interface. Not kChat, unfortunately. Well, not kChat, but the tools, classic tools to tell you.
We're there for them. And then, if you're a big company, it's worth contacting us and we can put you in touch with our sales department, Jay. Here's another one. Outlook. Do we have an alternative to Outlook Fat clients? It's quite complicated to configure a Kmail account and it's blocked to dethrone Microsoft Exchange. We've given you a partial answer.
As for Outlook Desktop, we have no plans to create a mail desktop application because our aim is to make the web version as complete as possible.
And what's more, in time this web version will be so powerful and complete that we won't want to use Outlook anymore because it's going to make our lives so much easier with the interactions that we'll develop with kChat and the other kSuite applications, that an application like Outlook would be completely disconnected from all that, and that wouldn't make much sense. It's possible to use Outlook with Infomaniak, mail, contacts, calendars, but that's not necessarily what we recommend for the long term in any case. I've also seen exchanges about, as you can see, it's expensive to switch to a more ethical solution. It's worth taking the time to compare offers. From Google, from Microsoft. Compare the number of users with the storage space and you'll quickly see that Infomaniak is much more competitive. When we calculated these offers, we really wanted to get the price right. And it was the same with our public cloud. We were surprised to see the margins that the web giants were taking, even though have a much greater capacity for economies of scale than we do, and yet they're still making much more money. In any case, thank you very much for your interest in all this, and thank you, Adrian, for your presentation. All that's left for me to say is see you soon.